They targeted a pupil, the Deathworld survivor. They should have feared Part 1, the exchange student. The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and David Kim stepped onto the metal platform of the Galactic Academy of Unified Species. He was 17 years old, average height, with black hair and calm brown eyes. He carried a single bag over his shoulder and wore the standard gray uniform of a new student. Around him, the space station stretched in every direction. Glass walkways connected massive towers. Artificial gardens floated between buildings. Ships of all sizes moved through the transparent ceiling above, coming and going from 100 different worlds. David stood still for a moment, taking it all in. He had seen many strange things in his life, but this was different. This was supposed to be his new home. A woman approached him. She was human, maybe 25 years old, with short black hair and a warm smile. Her name tag read Grace Park, Cultural Liaison. David Kim? She asked. He nodded. Welcome to the Academy. I'm Grace. I'll be helping you settle in. She looked at him carefully, the way people always did when they first met him. Like they were trying to figure something out. You're the first human student accepted here. How do you feel? David considered the question. Fine, he said. Grace waited for more, but nothing came. She cleared her throat. Okay, let me show you around. As they walked, Grace explained how things worked. The Academy was home to over 10,000 students from 12 different star systems. They came from species with names David couldn't pronounce, with bodies shaped in ways that seemed impossible. Some had 4 arms. Some had no arms at all. Some floated. Some crawled. The galaxy was vast, and humanity was just a small part of it. We've only been part of the galactic community for 20 years, Grace said. A lot of species still don't know what to make of us. Some are curious. Some are less friendly. I understand, David said. Grace glanced at him. There was something about the way he spoke. Flat, controlled, like every word was chosen carefully. She had read his file before he arrived. It mentioned that he had been through trauma, but the details were classified. Whatever had happened to him, it had left marks that didn't show on the surface. They reached the student housing block. David's room was small but clean. A bed, a desk, a window that looked out at the stars. It was more than enough. Classes start tomorrow, Grace said. You've been assigned to Class 7C. It's a mixed group. Try to make friends. She paused at the door. And David? If anyone gives you trouble, tell me. Some students here don't like humans. It's nothing personal. They just don't understand us yet. David set his bag on the bed. I'll be fine. Grace nodded slowly and left. Alone in his room, David walked to the window. He stared at the stars for a long time. His reflection looked back at him, a young man with old eyes. 3 years. That was how long he had been alone. 3 years on a planet that wanted to kill him every single day. 3 years of hunger, fear, and violence. 3 years of learning that the universe did not care if he lived or died. He had survived. That was the only thing that mattered. The next morning, David entered Class 7C. The room was large and curved, with seats arranged in a half circle around a central platform. About 30 students were already there, most of them aliens. He found an empty seat near the back and sat down quietly. A few students looked at him. Most ignored him. The instructor was a tall being with blue skin and 6 eyes arranged in a circle around its head. Its name was Professor Velen, and it taught interstellar navigation. We have a new student today, Velen announced. David Kim, human, Earth origin. The room went quiet. David felt dozens of eyes turn toward him. Stand up, please, Velen said. David stood. A voice came from the front row. Is it true humans come from a death world? The speaker was a Valkyrie, a species with bodies made of living crystal, tall and elegant and very proud. This one was young, maybe David's age, with sharp purple formations along his shoulders and head. His name, David would later learn, was Threx. Earth is classified as a Class 7 world, Valen confirmed. High gravity, extreme temperature variations, predator species, toxic flora, and unpredictable weather patterns. A murmur went through the room. Deathworlds were rare. Most intelligent species evolved on peaceful planets with stable climates. The idea that a sentient race could come from such a dangerous place was disturbing to many of them. Threx leaned forward. So humans are animals then? Survivors, not thinkers. Some students laughed. David said nothing. You may sit down, Valen said, and David did. The class continued, but David could feel Threx watching him. He didn't react. He had learned long ago that showing weakness invited attack. The best strategy was to become invisible. Over the next few weeks, David did exactly that. He attended every class. He completed every assignment. He ate alone, studied alone, and spoke only when necessary. He was polite to everyone and close to no one. But Threx didn't forget about him. The Velkari noble had power in the academy. His family was wealthy and connected. Other students followed him because they feared what would happen if they didn't. And Threx had decided that David was a target. It started small. Someone deleted David's homework files. His food was tampered within the cafeteria. His belongings were moved or hidden. Every day brought a new problem, a new humiliation. David reported nothing. He fixed what he could and ignored the rest. Grace noticed. You should tell someone, she said one evening. It won't help, David replied. How do you know? He looked at her with those calm, empty eyes. Because I've seen worse. Grace didn't know what to say to that. She wanted to help him, but he wouldn't let her. There was a wall around him, built from something she couldn't see. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that David was watching everything. He noticed which students followed Threx. He tracked their movements, their habits, their weaknesses. He memorized patrol schedules and security codes. He identified every exit, every blind spot, every potential weapon in every room. It was instinct. On Kepler 442b, awareness meant survival. Even here, in this safe and civilized place, he couldn't turn it off. Part of him was always hunting. Part of him was always ready. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this peace wouldn't last. Trouble was coming. When it did, David would be ready. They targeted a pupil, the Deathworld survivor. They should have feared Part 2, the Hierarchy 6. Weeks passed at the Galactic Academy, and David Kim learned how power worked in this place. The Velkari sat at the top. They were old money, old blood, old influence. Their families had been trading among the stars for thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. Threx was the son of a shipping lord, and everyone knew it. Below the Velkari came the other established species, the Marvani, with their thick gray skin and rumbling voices. The Seleth, thin and fast, with compound eyes that missed nothing. The Pale Ones, who never spoke but communicated through light patterns on their skin. And at the bottom, below everyone else, were the humans. David understood this system. He had seen it before in different forms. On Kepler 442b, there had been a hierarchy too. Predators at the top, prey at the bottom. The only way to survive was to stop being prey, but he wasn't ready to show that yet. So he kept his head down and watched. Grace Park visited him every few days. She brought news from Earth, snacks from the human section of the station, and worry in her eyes. You're too quiet, she told him one afternoon. The other students think you're strange. Good, David said. That's not good. You should try to fit in. Why? Grace opened her mouth, then closed it. She didn't have a good answer. The truth was, David didn't want to fit in. He didn't want friends who would slow him down or enemies who would hunt him. He wanted to be invisible until he finished his education and could leave this place forever. But the universe had other plans. Her name was Emily. She arrived on a transport from the Pacific Fleet Academy, a military school where humans trained to serve on starships. She was 18, with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Unlike David, she had no interest in being quiet. From her first day, Emma refused to accept the hierarchy. When a Valkyrie student pushed past her in the hallway, she pushed back. When a Morvani made a comment about human smell, she made a comment about Morvani intelligence. When someone tampered with her equipment, she found out who did it and confronted them publicly. David watched her with interest. She was brave. She was also stupid. Bravery without power was just another word for victim. Threx noticed Emma too. The Valkyrie noble saw her defiance as a challenge. No human had ever stood up to him before. It was amusing at first, then annoying, then personal. She needs to learn her place, Threx told his followers one evening. They were gathered in a private lounge, and David happened to be passing by. He heard everything through the thin walls. "What are you going to do?" one of them asked. "Teach her," Threx said simply. 3 days later, Emma was found unconscious in a maintenance corridor. Her ribs were cracked. Her face was bruised. The official report called it an accident, a fall, equipment malfunction. Everyone knew the truth. No one said anything. David visited her in the medical ward. She was awake but weak, lying in a white bed surrounded by machines that monitored her healing. "You should have been more careful," he said quietly. Emma looked at him. Even now, beaten and broken, there was fire in her eyes. "And you should have done something. You see everything that happens here." "I know you do, but you just watch." David didn't answer. "What are you afraid of?" Emma demanded. He considered the question. Afraid? He had stopped being afraid a long time ago. Fear was a luxury for people who had never truly faced death. What he felt now was something else. Patience, calculation, waiting for the right moment. "I'm not afraid," he said finally. "I'm just not ready yet." "Ready for what?" But David didn't explain. He simply held her hand for a moment, then stood up and left. That night, he walked to the observation deck on the top floor of the student building. It was empty at this hour. Through the massive windows, he could see the stars stretching out forever. He remembered another night, years ago, on a different world. He had been lying in a cave he had dug himself, covered in mud to hide his scent from predators. He was 14 years old, starving, injured, and completely alone. That night, he had made a decision. He would not die. No matter what the planet threw at him, no matter how much it hurt, he would survive. And he would never let anyone hurt him again. Standing here now, looking at those same stars, David made another decision. Threx had crossed a line. Hurting Emma wasn't just bullying anymore. It was violence. It was a message to all humans that they didn't matter. David was going to send a different message. He began planning the next morning. First, he needed information. He spent hours in the Academy's library, accessing public records and digging through databases. The Valkyrie were proud, which meant they were careless. They didn't hide their activities because they didn't think anyone would dare investigate them. David discovered that Threx's family was involved in illegal weapons trading. Ships registered to their company had been spotted in restricted zones. Money had moved through suspicious accounts. It wasn't enough to prove anything in court, but it was enough to cause problems. He also found that several Academy instructors were protecting Threx. They ignored complaints. They changed grades. They looked the other way when human students were hurt. The corruption went deep. David couldn't fight this alone. He needed help. Grace was his first choice. She was reluctant at first. "This is dangerous," she said. "If they find out what you're doing, they won't just hurt you. They'll destroy you. They'll destroy both of us." "I know," David said. "Then why?" He thought about Emma, lying in that hospital bed. He thought about all the human students who had been pushed down, insulted, beaten, and told they didn't belong. He thought about himself on Kepler 442b, learning that the only person who would save him was himself. "Because someone has to," he said. Grace stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "What do you need?" Emma joined them a week later, still healing but determined. She brought connections from the military academy, people who owed her favors, people who could access secure communications. Together, the three of them began to build a case. It was slow work. Every piece of evidence had to be verified. Every source had to be protected. One mistake could ruin everything, but David was patient. He had spent 3 years surviving on a death world. He could wait a few more weeks to destroy his enemies. Threx had no idea what was coming. He saw David in class every day, quiet and obedient, and thought he had won. He thought humans were weak, easy to break, not worth his attention. He was wrong. The predator was awake. The hunt had begun. They targeted a pupil, the Deathworld survivor. They should have feared ## Part 3. The predator. Remembers David Kim did not sleep well. He never had, not since Kepler 442b. Every night, his mind returned to that place, playing memories like old recordings he couldn't delete. Tonight was no different. He lay in his bed at the academy, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. But his thoughts were 3 years and 1,000 light years away. The colony ship had been called the Morning Star. It carried 800 passengers from Earth to a new world that scientists said could support human life. David was 14, traveling with his parents, excited about starting over on a new planet. The journey was supposed to take 6 months. They made it 5. Something went wrong with the engines during atmospheric entry. David never learned the exact cause. All he remembered was the alarm, the screaming, his mother pushing him toward an escape pod, and then fire. He woke up alone. The escape pod had landed in a forest. Red trees stretched toward a purple sky. The air was thick and hot and smelled like copper. Everything was wrong. David climbed out of the pod and looked around. There was no sign of the ship. No sign of other survivors. Just endless forest in every direction. He was 14 years old. He had no training, no weapons, no supplies except what the pod contained. And he was standing on one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. Kepler 442b was classified as a Class 7 death world. That meant it was barely survivable for humans. The gravity was 40% higher than Earth, which made every movement exhausting. The temperature swung wildly between boiling days and freezing nights. The plants released toxic spores. The water was filled with parasites. And the animals were hungry. The first creature attacked David on his second night. It came out of the darkness without warning, a thing with too many legs and a mouth full of curved teeth. David ran. He climbed a tree and stayed there until morning, shaking with fear. He almost died that night. He almost died many nights after, but slowly, day by day, he learned. He learned which plants were safe to eat and which would kill him. He learned how to find clean water by following certain insects. He learned how to build shelter using bones and hide from animals he had killed. He learned how to make weapons, spears from sharpened wood, traps from vines, poison from crushed seeds. Most importantly, he learned how to think like a predator. On Kepler 442b, hesitation meant death. Mercy meant death. Fear meant death. The only way to survive was to become harder and colder than the world around him. David became hard. David became cold by the end of his first year. He had stopped running from predators. He hunted them instead. By the end of his second year, nothing on the planet scared him anymore. By the end of his third year, he had forgotten what it felt like to be a normal human boy. The rescue ship found him by accident. A survey team was mapping the planet when they picked up an old distress signal from the Morning Star's escape pods. They followed it to a valley filled with bones. David was sitting in the center, skinning a creature he had just killed. He was 17 years old. He weighed less than he had at 14, but his body was lean and strong, built for survival. His eyes were empty. The rescue team's report described him as calm and cooperative. It also noted that he showed no emotional response to being saved. When they told him his parents were dead, he simply nodded. When they offered him food and water, he examined it carefully before consuming it. When they asked him how he had survived 3 years alone, he said only 2 words: "I adapted." The psychologists who evaluated David afterward used words like trauma, dissociation, and survival mode. They said he had shut down parts of himself to stay alive. They said with time and therapy, he might recover. David didn't believe them. He didn't feel broken. He felt complete. The person he had been before the crash was gone, and someone new had taken his place. Someone who understood how the universe really worked. Life was a competition. The strong survived. The weak did not. Kindness was a luxury that could get you killed. Trust was a weakness that invited betrayal. These were the lessons Kepler-442b had taught him. He carried them with him everywhere, even here, in the safety of the Galactic Academy. Now, lying in bed, David let those memories flow through him. He remembered the taste of blood in his mouth. He remembered the sound of bones breaking. He remembered the feeling of standing alone under alien stars, knowing that no one was coming to save him. And he remembered the day the predator pack cornered him. It was near the end of his third year. 6 creatures, each twice his size, working together to trap him against the cliff face. They were smart, those predators. They had learned that David was dangerous and had formed a group to take him down. David should have died that day. The odds were impossible, but impossible was just a word. On Kepler-442b, David had learned that survival was about refusing to accept death. No matter how certain it seemed, he fought. He used every trick he had learned, every weapon he had made, every ounce of strength in his body. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, 6 predators lay dead, and David stood bleeding but alive. That was the day the rescue ship arrived. They found him in that valley, surrounded by corpses, and they looked at him like he was a monster. Maybe he was. Maybe Kepler-442b had turned him into something that wasn't quite human anymore. But he was alive. That was what mattered. David opened his eyes and sat up in bed. The memories faded, replaced by the reality of his small room at the academy. Through the window, he could see the stars. Tomorrow, he would continue his plan against Threx. He would gather more evidence, recruit more allies, and prepare for the confrontation that was coming. Part of him felt guilty about what he was doing. The old David, the one who had existed before the crash, would have reported the bullying to an authority and hoped for the best. That David believed in fairness and rules and doing the right thing, but that David was dead. The person who had taken his place knew the rules were only as strong as the people who enforced them. And in this academy, the powerful made their own rules. Threx thought he was strong because he came from a wealthy family and had followers who feared him. But that wasn't real strength. Real strength came from surviving things that should have killed you. Real strength came from looking death in the face and refusing to blink. David had that strength. Threx did not. The Valkyrie noble had no idea what kind of enemy he had made. He saw David as a quiet, obedient human who would never fight back. He didn't see the predator underneath the surface. Soon, he would. David lay back down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow would be a busy day. He needed rest. For the first time in weeks, he slept without dreaming. The memories were quiet now, waiting in the darkness. They would come back when he needed them. On Kepler 4, 42b. He had learned to use everything, every experience, every pain, every fear, as a tool for survival. Here at the Academy, he would do the same. The hunt was just beginning. They targeted a pupil, the Deathworld survivor. They should have feared. Part 4. The hunt begins. David Kim moved through the academy like a ghost. He attended classes, ate meals, and followed routines just like every other student. But beneath that ordinary surface, something very different was happening. He was hunting Grace. Park had provided him with access to the Academy's communication networks. A job as cultural liaison gave her permissions that regular students didn't have. She used those permissions to help David trace messages, track movements, and map the web of corruption that surrounded Threx. Emily, still recovering from her injuries, but growing stronger every day, worked her military contacts. She found people who had information about the Valkyrie weapons trade, people who were willing to talk if their names stayed hidden. Together, the three of them built a case. Every night, David reviewed what they had gathered. Every morning, he looked for gaps that needed filling. The picture that emerged was worse than he had expected. Threx's family wasn't just trading illegal weapons. They were selling to anyone who would pay. Pirates, terrorists, rebel groups fighting against their own governments. The money flowed through fake companies and hidden accounts, eventually finding its way back to the Valkyrie homeworld. More disturbing, several Academy officials knew about this and did nothing. Some received payments. Others received favors. A few simply looked the other way because challenging the Valkyrie meant challenging power itself. David understood now why the harassment of human students was tolerated. It wasn't just prejudice. It was a system designed to keep certain species at the top and others at the bottom. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had no allies, no history, no power. They were easy targets. That was going to change. David's first move was subtle. He anonymously sent evidence of the weapons trading to a journalist named Michael Torres, a human reporter working for the Galactic Press Corps. Torres was known for investigating corruption and had no love for the Valkyrie after they had threatened his family years earlier. The journalist verified the information carefully. When he was satisfied it was real, he began preparing a story. David's second move was more direct. He started approaching Threx's followers one by one, finding each of them alone when no one else was watching. The conversations were always short. "I know what you've been doing," David would say calmly. "I have evidence, pictures, messages, records. If this information becomes public, your academic career is over. Your family will be shamed. Your future will be destroyed." Then he would pause, letting the words sink in. "But I'm giving you a choice. Walk away from Threx. Stop harassing human students. Do these things and nothing happens. Continue as you are, and everything I have goes to the authorities." Most of them were cowards. They had followed Threx because it was easy and safe. When faced with real consequences, they crumbled. One by one, they abandoned him. Threx noticed his circle shrinking, but didn't understand why. He was too proud to ask questions, too confident to consider that someone might be working against him. Meanwhile, David's third move targeted the corrupt officials. This was more complicated. He couldn't threaten them directly. They had too much power, and he had too little. Instead, he found creative ways to expose their failures. One instructor who had covered up attacks on human students suddenly found her personnel file leaked to the Academy Review Board. Another who had changed grades for Valkyrie. Students discovered that his communications with Threx's family were now in the hands of the Ethics Committee. David never left traces. He never made accusations he couldn't prove. He simply placed information where it would be found and let others draw conclusions. Within a month, 3 officials had been removed from their positions. 2 more were under investigation. The Academy's administration was in chaos, and no one understood what was happening except Threx. The Valkyrie noble wasn't stupid. He watched his followers disappear and his protectors fall, and he knew someone was responsible. He just didn't know who. "It's the humans," he told his remaining allies. "It has to be. They're plotting against us." He was right, but he was looking in the wrong direction. He suspected Emma, whose loud defiance made her an obvious target. He suspected Grace, whose position gave her access to sensitive information. He even suspected the human reporter who was now publishing stories about Valkyrie crimes. But he never suspected David, the quiet student in the back of the class. The one who never spoke up, never fought back, never showed any sign of being a threat. How could someone like that be dangerous? That was David's greatest weapon. He had learned on Kepler 442b, but the most dangerous predators were the ones you never saw coming. A loud threat could be avoided. A quiet one would already have its teeth in your throat before you knew it was there. Emma grew impatient as the weeks passed. Her ribs had healed, and she wanted direct action. "We have enough evidence to destroy him," she argued during one of their secret meetings. "Why are we waiting?" "Because evidence isn't enough," David replied. "We need to break him. Not just his reputation, his confidence. His belief that he's untouchable. When we're done, I want him to understand exactly what he did wrong." Grace looked uncomfortable. "This is starting to feel like revenge." David considered that. "Maybe it is," he admitted. "But it's also justice. Threx hurt people because he thought there would be no consequences. Showing him that he was wrong isn't just about punishing him. It's about proving that humans aren't weak, that we fight back." Emma nodded firmly. Grace remained silent, but she didn't object. The final phase of the plan came together 2 weeks later. Michael Torres published his full investigation into Valkyrie weapons trading. The story spread across the galactic news networks. Threx's family was publicly accused of crimes against multiple species at the same time. David arranged for the Academy's evidence files to be reviewed by an independent committee. The files contained records of every complaint against Threx, every incident that had been covered up, every payment that had changed hands. The committee's findings were damaging. They recommended Threx's immediate expulsion and criminal investigation. But Threx wasn't ready to go quietly. He was Valkyrie. His family had been powerful for thousands of years. He would not be brought down by humans. He gathered his remaining followers and sent David a message. "Meet me in the biodome tonight. Just you. No allies, no witnesses. If you don't come, I'll make sure every human at this academy pays for what you've done." David read the message 3 times. He knew it was a trap. Threx wanted to hurt him, maybe kill him, and make it look like an accident. Grace begged him not to go. Emma offered to come with him. David refused both. "This is between me and him," he said. "It always has been." That night, David walked alone toward the biodome. It was a massive structure at the edge of the academy, designed to simulate different planetary environments for training purposes. Inside, students could experience anything from frozen wastelands to volcanic deserts. Threx had set the controls to create a Class 5. Hazard world, toxic atmosphere, unstable ground, and predator drones designed for combat simulation. He thought this would give him an advantage. He thought David would be afraid. David reached the biodome entrance and paused. Through the glass walls, he could see the artificial environment waiting inside. Fog rolled across broken ground. Strange lights flickered in the distance. It looked like something out of a nightmare. It looked like home. David smiled, the first real smile he has shown in months. Then he opened the door and stepped inside. The hunt was almost over. They targeted a pupil, the Deathworld survivor. They should have feared. Part 5. The Deathworld's child. The biodome swallowed David Kim whole. Toxic fog wrapped around him like a blanket, thick enough to hide anything more than 10 feet away. The ground beneath his feet was unstable, a mix of loose rock and artificial mud designed to make walking difficult. Somewhere in the distance, predator drones hummed, their sensors scanning for targets. David breathed deep and smiled. This was nothing. On Kepler 442b, the fog had been poisonous enough to burn his lungs. The ground had been alive with creatures that burrowed from below. The predators had been real, not machines with program patterns. Threx had tried to create a nightmare. Instead, he had built a playground. David moved forward, his steps careful but confident. He had spent 3 years learning how to navigate terrain like this. His eyes adjusted to the low light. His ears picked up sounds that others would miss. His body remembered movements that had kept him alive, against creatures far more dangerous than Volcari students. The first drone found him within minutes. It emerged from the fog silently, shaped like a bird with razor wings. David saw it coming before it saw him. He sidestepped, grabbed it by its wing joint as it passed, and slammed it into the ground. 3 seconds to find its power core. 2 seconds to rip it out. The drone died without making a sound. David kept moving. Voices echoed through the fog. Threx had brought 6 followers with him, the last ones loyal enough or stupid enough to stand by his side. They were spread out, trying to corner David, not realizing that they were the ones being hunted. The first follower was a Morvani, big and slow, carrying a stun baton he probably didn't know how to use properly. David circled behind him, using the fog as cover. When he struck, it was quick. A kick to the back of the knee, an arm around the throat, pressure in exactly the right place. The Morvani collapsed, unconscious without ever seeing his attacker. David tied his wrists and ankles with strips torn from the Morvani's own jacket. He would wake up embarrassed, but unharmed. The second and third followers were together, which made things easier. They were Seleth, thin and nervous, their compound eyes darting at every shadow. David threw a rock to draw their attention one direction, then came from another. He knocked them both down before they could react, and left them tied back to dashback. 3 down. 3 plus Threx to go. The fourth follower was smarter. He heard the commotion and started running toward the biodome exit. David caught up to him easily. Humans were persistence hunters, built for endurance, and few species could match them over distance. He tackled the fleeing student and put him to sleep with the same chokehold he had used on the Morvani. The fifth and sixth followers found each other and decided to stand together. They called out challenges into the fog, trying to sound brave. David didn't answer. He circled them, silent as a shadow, and waited. Fear was a tool. On Kepler 442b, he had learned that prey made mistakes when they were afraid. These two were no different. After 5 minutes of shouting at nothing, they began to argue. After 10 minutes, they turned on each other, each blaming the other for their situation. David struck during their argument. 2 quick movements, 2 unconscious bodies. 2 more enemies removed from the field. Now only Threx remained. The Volcari noble was at the center of the biodome, standing on a raised platform that gave him a view of the surrounding area. He had armed himself with an actual weapon, a plasma cutter stolen from the engineering lab, hot enough to slice through metal. He was no longer pretending this was a lesson or a game. He wanted David dead. David approached openly. There was no point hiding now. The fog parted as he walked forward, revealing him step by step. Threx's crystalline body caught the artificial light, making him look like a statue carved from purple glass. His eyes were wide with something David recognized: fear. "You," Threx said. "It was you all along." David stopped at the base of the platform. "Yes. How?" "You're nobody. You're human. You don't have power, connections, money. You have nothing." David looked up at the Volcari noble. For a moment, he felt something close to pity. Threx truly didn't understand. He had lived his entire life believing that power came from family and wealth and status. He had never learned the truth. "You're wrong," David said quietly. "I have something you don't. I survived Kepler 442b. Threx's eyes flickered. Everyone in the galaxy knew what Deathworlds were. But knowing and understanding were different things. 3 years, David continued. Alone, on a planet that wanted me dead every single day. I've been hunted by things that make your predator drones look like toys. I've killed creatures twice my size with weapons I made from bones and rocks. I've faced death so many times that it stopped scaring me." He took a step forward. Threx raised the plasma cutter, his hands shaking. "You thought you could break me with insults and sabotage. You thought hurting Emma would teach humans their place. But all you did was wake something up. Something I've been trying to keep asleep since I left that planet. Another step. On Kepler 442b, I learned that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes. It's about never giving up, never backing down, never accepting defeat. Another step. He was at the edge of the platform now. You wanted to know what humans are capable of. Now you know. Threx swung the plasma cutter. It was a clumsy attack, driven by panic rather than skill. David ducked under it, stepped inside Threx's guard, and struck. The blow wasn't meant to kill. David had made that decision long ago. He wasn't a murderer, but he knew exactly where to hit a Valkyrie to cause maximum pain without permanent damage. Threx screamed and dropped the weapon. His crystalline armor cracked where David's fist had connected. He fell to his knees. Gasping, David picked up the plasma cutter and switched it off. He stood over the broken noble, looking down without hatred or anger. Just calm. Just control. Your family's crimes are public knowledge now, David said. Your protectors in the academy are gone. Your followers have abandoned you. When security arrives, they'll find you here with a stolen weapon and 6 unconscious victims. Your academic career is over. Your reputation is destroyed. You have nothing left. Threx looked up at him, tears streaming from his eyes. "Why?" he whispered. "Why do this to me?" David crouched down so they were eye to eye. "Because you thought humans were weak. Because you hurt people who couldn't fight back. Because someone needed to show you that there are consequences for cruelty." He stood up. "Remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be powerless. And next time you think about hurting someone smaller than you, remember that you never know what they've survived." The biodome doors opened. Security flooded in, followed by Grace and Emma and half the Academy's administration. They found Threx on his knees, surrounded by bound and unconscious followers, with David standing calmly in the center of it all. The investigation that followed took weeks. The evidence David had gathered was examined and verified. Threx was expelled and sent home to face criminal charges. His family's business was shut down. Several former Academy officials went to prison. And humans, for the first time since joining the galactic community, were looked at with new eyes. Not as primitives from a dangerous world. Not as weak creatures to be pitied, but as survivors. as people who could endure anything and come back stronger. A month after the biodome incident, Grace found David on the observation deck where he often went to think. He was staring at the stars, his face peaceful. "How do you feel?" she asked. David considered the question. It was the same question she had asked when he first arrived. Back then, his answer had been empty. Now, something was different. "Better," he said. "Not healed, but better." Grace nodded. "The Academy is changing. They're implementing new rules to protect minority species students. They want you to help design the program." "Me? You showed everyone that humans won't be pushed around. You're kind of a hero now." David shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I just did what I had to do." Grace smiled. "That's what heroes always say." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. After a while, Emma joined them, her injuries fully healed, her spirit as fierce as ever. "New transport coming in tomorrow," Emma said. "More human students. Word is spreading that the Academy is actually safe for us now." David thought about those new students. They would arrive nervous and uncertain, just like he had. But they wouldn't have to face what he had faced. They wouldn't have to learn the hard lessons he had learned. That was worth something. Maybe it was worth everything. "I'll meet them at the shuttle bay," David said. "Help them settle in." Emma raised an eyebrow. "You? Being social?" For the first time in a long time, David laughed. It was a small sound, rusty from disuse, but real. "Someone has to look out for them," he said. "Might as well be me." And so, when the new transport arrived, David Kim was waiting. He greeted each student with a calm smile and quiet words. He showed them around the Academy, answered their questions, and made them feel welcome. One student, a young girl who reminded him of himself when he first arrived, asked him who he was. David looked at her, remembering everything he had been through: the crash, the planet, the survival, the Academy, the hunt. He thought about who he had been and who he had become. "Just a survivor," he said. "Like all of us." The girl nodded, not fully.